Oh wow, so that's how that works. Hi, I'm Terry Smart from Chestnut Products, and today we're being joined in the studio by our good friend Stewart Furini. Stewart, great to have you here.
It's a pleasure, Terry.
Thank you, mate, I really appreciate it. And what are you going to be showing us today? Like, I don't really know.
Today, some very simple application techniques using the rainbow colours in the Spirit Stains range. My favourite colours.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'll let you crack on with that.
Right, so the way that I'm going to apply them is with some safety cloth or some paper towel. Very simple methods, and you can get quite a wide range of effects with that. But we do have to, of course, consider health and safety. So protect your hands from the stain with some gloves. And also you should wear eye protection. So let's get these on, that's that way round. So I've got some gloves on and some safety glasses. Now I find that the best way to work with this is to have all of the colours available at once. You need to protect the bed of your lathe. So sometimes you can cover it with a cloth or a tray that you can put your bits of cloth in so that you don't get your lathe covered. Now the very simplest, easiest way of applying the stains is from the bottle onto a piece of cloth and just wiping the colour on. And this is a technique that is super simple. You don't need any special equipment, you don't need any artistic skill. You just wipe the colour on, and that will give you your first beginner step of applying colour. Now I'll put some yellow all the way round. You need very little. I know some people are concerned that if you put it on with a cloth, you're going to have a lot of it soaking into the cloth, and you're being a bit wasteful with it. But you can see there are 2 little drops of colour on here, and I've covered pretty much all of this piece of beech. And we've got our first steps in colour. Now for some people that might be enough, doing 1 coat of colour. For me, I like to take it a little bit further. So I like to introduce the idea of there being some texture in the colour, adding some depth to it. So one of the things that I really like about using the spirit stain are the way that they would build up colour over the top of each other. Even after they're dried, if you put some spirit stain back on, it will reactivate what is under there. So I'm just going to use one area and dab some colour on. So I have a range of different words to describe the techniques. This is dabbing, and you can see there you don't have to completely cover the whole of the surface of the wood. I'll leave that a moment to dry and move on to another colour. So this is going to be a sort of sea green kind of effect. So using the blue and the royal blue for this example. And what you see happening here is what I was talking about a few moments ago, about creating a sense of depth with the colour. So we've got a flat surface with colour, which is very attractive, and that might suit. I've done a few bowls like that. But if you want to create something a little bit more dramatic, then this is a nice way of doing that. So even though it now looks like it's very dark, I can put another colour back over the top. I can go back to my light blue, and you'll see it work and react with that dark blue and lighten it. Obviously, it's going to have a green tinge because of the yellow underneath there. But you can do this with any of the colours that you choose. And what I find is the more you put on, at some point it starts to sit on top of the other colours rather than being absorbed into the wood. Now this is just going to be a sampler piece. So you have to take a leap of imagination to imagine what that would be like all the way around the piece of wood. Because I'm going to use one piece to show you a few different techniques. So if we leave that to dry a little bit, hopefully you can see now there's a lot more variation in the wood. And because they're stains rather than paints, they're not obliterating the grain of the wood. So the grain is coming through. You can see that particularly here with the cathedral effect of the grain there. Now, for some techniques that I use, I quite like to have a wood with very plain grain. If you're using a very open grained wood, ash for example, then the grain figure in there sometimes really fights the colouring technique that you're using. So more complicated patterns like this, where you're building up layers of colour, can sort of fight against the wood in some way. So for woods with strong grain, this approach, the first approach, just wiping on one colour, is the way that I would probably go. Right, back to the royal blue. And just one area that I always focus on, and I'll do that even though this is going to just be a sample piece, is round the edges. You've got to be really careful that you make sure your coverage goes right to the edge. You don't leave a bit uncovered at the edge, because it just leaps out at the eye as, oh, you missed a bit. So, and this obviously is a very wide canvas that I'm working on. You might not end up making a bowl that small in the middle, but I always like to colour more than I'm going to have as the finished rim, so that I know I've coloured all the way to the edge. And occasionally you might get an effect, you think that's wonderful, amazing, and I do just want a little bowl in the middle for 3 peanuts. Right, I'm going to go back to the yellow, because like I said earlier about when you put the stains over each other, they reactivate and they blend again, because the solvent will kick in on the colour underneath. So that I might pick some areas where I want to highlight maybe a particular bit of the grain. So you can see here we've lightened that up considerably by putting the yellow back over the blue. I could pick another area to run that through. And really, for me, the whole purpose of doing this is to enjoy what you're doing, to experiment, to have some fun, see what happens. So, I've exaggerated the effect there, but you can see that yellow has really reacted with the darker colours underneath. You might not want to have those straight lines. It might be part of your design, but I just soften those edges, because you can get to a point where you think, oh no, I've ruined it. That edge is very harsh, it stands out. I wanted it to be a bit more subtle. You can just blend that in. And all we're doing is something anyone can do. It's a bit of paper towel with some colour on it, some stain on it, just tap, 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 tap. Okay. What happens if we put some darker stuff on? We can do some discussion of colour theory, I suppose. The blues are not far away on the colour wheel from purple. And we can use this to add some local areas of interest, some darker colour. So maybe around the edge here. And at first it might look, oh, that's a little bit obvious, it's standing out, it's sort of drawing attention to itself in a way that distracts from the other colours. But you guessed that, we can go back in and soften those edges up. And you don't have to limit it to stain. You can combine the stain with other colouring products like the iridescent paints or even the rainbow waxes. I quite like to put a bit of silver sometimes on this. But let's pick an area here where we've got the purple and soften those edges in with a bit of the blue. So I think what I've sort of almost unconsciously done is the peacock colours. And they're working very nicely, particularly in this area here. And the blue is coming through now much stronger from where we first applied it, over the yellow where it goes green very easily. Yeah, now I think that's perhaps enough. So that's dabbing. And we get these washes of colour, swirls of colour. You can leave it like this. I know sometimes people might want to put a border around it or cut a little wooden edge to frame it. I generally tend to leave it because I like the colour to do as much of the work as possible. Right, so that's one of the effects you can build up by just dabbing paper towel with stain on over the piece of wood. I'm going to move now to a different way of applying it to try to make it a little bit more of a pattern. Safety glasses back on, just in case you get a splash of colour. That's what they're designed to protect you from. I'm going to go with a slightly different colour palette for this one. I think I'll start off with some red. Now, I'm just going to put it in the middle of a piece of cloth. Couple of dabs back in the box. I do find this size box perfect for keeping all of your colours in, but then I'm just going to fold the piece of paper towel so I can get a line. So I'll try to join up these different sections so it looks like something completed, but if you just dab that along, spin it, dab another colour and work your way around. Now I'm doing this at some speed, so maybe the angles have gone slightly awry, but obviously you can take a lot more time and care with this. Just widen them out towards the end, make them a little bit more interesting. And one of the things to say is that at the early stages of doing some colouring, you might look at that and think, well, that looks very simplistic and a bit crude and a bit, dare I even say, childlike. Although actually I'm quite proud of some of the childlike effects that I create. But the more you work the colour and the more colours that go on, you can go from this very simplistic looking pattern to something much more involved and interesting. So the colours that go together nicely here, yellow, orange and red, I'm going to stick with those colours. So some orange now. One little dab, give it a quick twist. Don't ask me how I know how far a bottle of Spirit Stains spreads if you were to knock one off. Right, so a bit of orange in there. And the harder you press, the more contact obviously the paper makes and you get more of a solid colour. So with this I'm being a little lighter handed with the pressure, and you can build up some interesting little patterns and techniques. If you were to do this with other types of paper like kitchen towel, you can sometimes pick up the embossing pattern, which adds another little bit of texture. But you might end up with the name of the paper towel manufacturer inadvertently. Oh, that's orange. I'll go back to some red. You can use the same bit of cloth. And like we saw around here with these, when you put the colour back over other colours or other layers of colour, it will reactivate. But it will also, if you put it over the same colour, it should intensify the effect of that colour, make it stand out a bit stronger. And so, you know, like I said at the beginning, you know, just have a little bit of a play, see what happens with the colours. Because it's very easy to correct any mistake that you've made with just a little bit of sandpaper. Right, I'm going to do some black now. Now, black I often will use as a colour to increase the contrast. It makes things stand out more, it frames the other colours. And at the moment, I'm still thinking this is a little bit too crude in its design for what I want it to really look like. It's very easy to overdo it with black, so try and be a little even more light-handed with this. he says, putting a great big splodge in the middle. There we go. Just put this in, maybe break it up a little rather than carrying on with those lines. Like I said back with the blue as well, concentrate on your edges. So this bit of the edge is looking good. It's a little bit missing there. Looking at that, it's kind of reminding me of a 1970s blanket, travel blanket kind of thing. I do sometimes find myself recreating fabric patterns with the colouring choices that I make. I'm sure it's subconscious, not deliberate. Right, so let's go back over with some red, because I really want to strengthen the effect of that red. You can see round here it's getting much stronger than round here where we've just got the one layer. But it doesn't use a lot of stain. They go a long way. Right, so the red I'm happy with, the orange less so, and I might even come back with a bit of yellow in a moment. So these colours, they're all next to each other on the colour wheel, so they work very nicely with each other. But without the black, I think they don't pop as much as they could. And what you perhaps might be picking up is the colour going back over the black is softening those edges. It's less stronger colour. So here, for example, where I've gone back over it with the orange as compared to here, if you want a crisp, strong black over the top of your other colours, then it needs to go on as the last colour. But you can see here it's really softening that, toning it down. There does come a point, of course, where you do have to stop and think, that's it, that's finished. And that's going to be different for each of us, I'm sure. I think I have a bit of a reputation for perhaps not knowing when to stop. So looking at that, I think there's enough movement and depth in there to make it an interesting effect, much more complex looking than the early stages when it looked a bit of a, oh, that's a bit simplistic and childlike. But I'm going to carry on just to see what happens. Right, so I'm going to go with some yellow, but my yellow cloth is rather contaminated with the blues from the previous colouring, so I'll start off with a new bit of cloth for this. So we should see this yellow will lighten parts of the colour where I put it on, and it'll give a sort of a warmer glow. The camera should pick that up. And one of the things I'm conscious of is a personal preference, is if I'm colouring the rim, I don't want any bare wood to be showing through. And I know I've coloured it with some yellow, but there are bits of where the stain hasn't covered. I like to have the contrast between the yellow, orange, red, whatever colours I've used, and then the inside, which I'll keep as a natural wood finish. So there, that's really warming up the other colours. And yellow is a great colour to use to combine over the top, to blend the colours together and soften some of the harder edges. So the black has been toned down quite a lot. The orange has added some warmth. The yellow over the top of that is giving a nice glow. And there's some complexity in the finished image that belies the very simple application technique of just having a piece of paper towel. Right, so I think that's about that for that example, and we'll move on to a third way of applying the colour that's a little bit messier and a little bit more free-form. Right, so the next technique is going to use kitchen roll, because it's a little bit stiffer than the safety cloth. And I just roll this into a tube and then use it as a little dabbing brush. I dab it into some colour and then put it onto the wood. And you can build up, again, quite intricate patterns of colour and texture doing this. I'm going to do it with black and then put other colours over the top. And then if I'm feeling particularly artistic near the end, I might even use some paint brushes to give a little bit more precision with where I dab the colour. I'm not just pouring it into this tray. I've got a palette here that I'll be putting the colour in. So pour a little bit in. You don't need very much. Lid back on. And here we go. I've got some bits of kitchen roll already rolled up. And just put that in to the stain. Now, the first time you put the colour on, it's probably going to go on stronger than you want it to. So what I normally do to help with that is use the middle of the bit of wood to dab my colour on and see how it's coming off, and that's coming off fine. So I'm just going to move that around. And again, this looks a little crude to begin with, but the effect is really built up by just repeating a very simple action over and over. One day I might just do something with two colours, but it's probably not going to be today. You can open up the coil of paper to change the sort of shape that you're making. And you can see if I keep going back over the areas, it builds up a more complicated pattern. I suppose you could try to impress people that you've done it with a very fine paintbrush and you've got such super control, but it's really just demonstrating the same principle as before, that simple repeated actions build up more interesting complex patterns of colour. And again, we'll see that as we put other colours over this, like with round here, the black will get softened somewhat. Right, so I can't decide what colours. I think I'm going to do, I'm going to do purple. Colour I don't use very often. It's had a bit of a go on there. So again, just pour a little bit into my palette. Get another roll of paper towel. Okay, that's going on. Take the excess off, and then it's close in colour, of course, to the black, but we're going to put another colour over this. And I'll leave this area to come and do some work with some paint brushes. The other thing I should say is that there are a couple of things that really help to improve the look of this kind of technique. You have to have a sort of little bit of faith that although it might look messy, once you've got your clean wooden edge against it, it really does frame the technique and make it look a lot better. And then when you put some finish on, particularly if it's a flat surface like this, you get a gloss lacquer over the top. That really pops the colours beautifully. Right, I'm going with my favourite colour, blue. So similar colour palette to around here with just the addition of some black. Now I'll try to pour a bit less of this colour in. That's it. Now I'm going to need another little cylinder of kitchen roll. You do need to take care with your edges here to get them lined up so that you get a nice application of the shape. And this blue, being the lightest colour, is going to blend with those other colours underneath and give us something a bit warmer, I hope. Okay. If it unrolls, just roll it up again. Bit more colour on. And with this colour, like I said earlier, take care of your edges. Okay. I actually was so careful not to pour too much blue in, I didn't pour enough in. So another little drop. That's come very unrolled. Let's roll it up again. If you're worried about wasting lots of paper towel, you can put one colour on and then snip the end off and use your next colour. So that's building up something a bit more interesting. I find some colour combinations with different techniques work better than others. So when I use the brushes on the other side, I'm going to use different colours so you can see that different effect. But there's nothing to stop you combining some of the techniques from earlier. So if I get a piece of paper towel, we've seen that when we put yellow on down here, that really made a difference. So I'm going to go back to some yellow. This is super advanced paper towel application. Cylinders and lines, goodness. Just work that into some of those areas. And like I said before about using yellow, it's a nice colour to blend other colours together and put a nice warm glow over things. So you should see that's really lifting those colours out. And if we compare it to what we started with the black on its own, you've got something much more interesting and textured. Although I have to admit to really liking yellow and black on their own, and one day I might just do yellow and black. Right, so around here I'm going to use the warmer colours. I'm going to start off with some red. Get that in another little bit of the palette down here. So if you're putting colour on with a paper towel, you can see you can get some fairly precise effects, but it's rather large in its area when you're dabbing colour on, and you don't get the same precision of being able to place your colours as precisely as if you become a proper artist and use a paintbrush. So let's see, and you clean up your brushes later on, rinse them out with some water. That generally removes most of the colour, and if you want to give them a proper clean, then to dip a little bit in meths. But I generally find soapy water is fine for these brushes. So you can get much finer placing of the colour with this. And I'm just going to work it into this edge. Try and make it almost look like this could be a finished avant-garde piece of wood art. So you can see you can get very fine placement of colour. And one of the reasons I like using the spirit-based stains as opposed to water stains is they don't blend into each other in the same way or into the wood as I find water-based stains do. So you can get some nice sharp definition of the colour against each other. I guess that's because water-based stains and wood have the same solvent, water. So, and again, this can look a little bit, it looks a bit messy. Have faith and keep going. Somewhere I've got a little wooden block that I can keep my paintbrushes in so they don't roll all over the place. Some orange. To go in, there we go. And actually, if you're putting it on with a paintbrush, you need very, very little poured out. So let's do some little orange bits in there. Now, I have to say, probably of the colouring that I've done in this room, this is probably my least favourite. But it just shows the versatility of the colours and the way that you can build up complicated patterns and shapes with very simple techniques. I'm regretting this rather stray bit of blue here. Let's disguise it. So just working that around. So we've got very different looks depending on the colour and the way that we've put that colour on. Round here we've got something much more homogeneous, I guess that would be the word. All blended and mixed together. Here we've got something busier. The colours stand out more than they do with the blue. It's still got a little bit of that 1970s vibe going on for me. And again, like I said, you know, this is a sampler. If you had that all the way round and you turned your inside out, then you're going to have something that looks much more pleasing to the eye. Now, in terms of, is it enough? I think that probably is, but I'm going to go back to some of the red, I think. Not just because I've still got quite a bit left in my palette, because I poured quite a lot in. No, it's all deliberate, this. So you can see here where I just put these other bits of red on, it sits darker, it builds up over the other colours. And there's a gremlin in my head saying, try to mess it up. What happens if you put some white on? Now the white stain, I use that more often when I'm putting stain and colouring textured pieces. But I should get it out. It doesn't often get an outing. And show you what happens if we put some white over these. Yeah. Now that's looking a little more finished to me than it was a few moments ago, before I came back in with the red. If you're going to use the white stain, make sure you give it a good shake to mix it up. I think the reason for doing that is the white for me seems to have a slightly bit more pigment in it that settles in the bottom sometimes. So a bit of white. What is going to happen when I put this white on? It's going to lighten the other colours. You'll see it white for a moment and then it will absorb the colours beneath it. And it's sort of introducing a sort of cloudy, misty kind of look. Which again, what I like about that is it lends a bit more depth to the effect of the colour. You do find if you get seriously into colouring wood on the lathe that you spend a lot of your time standing like this. Yep. I'm tempted to give you a little show of what happens if we put it over the blue here from earlier on. So you might decide that you want to mix some of the stains to make a lighter colour. And if you're going to do that, what I suggest is you start off with white and then add the colour into it to build up to the colour that you want. If you do it the other way round, you often find that you use a lot of white to get to where you want the colour to go. So this has been on for some time, but just to show how it will still reactivate what is there sometime later. You can see here it's picking up, pulling up the other colours. If I were a better artist, I'm a wood decorator really, you might be able to build something up like crashing waves and surf. But even just a little light spattering of that around here, you can see it picks up, reactivates the other colour. Has it improved it? I'm not sure. But for me, that doesn't matter today because it's just about showing how you can start with one colour, mix it with another, put it on with a piece of flat paper or put it on with a cylinder of paper, and you can build up a whole range of different techniques and textures. And if you remember what this looked like from the beginning with just the wipe of colour, which is, very attractive, Everyone loves yellow, don't they? Especially one of my daughters, it's her favourite colour. The amount of different looks that you get from just those 9 colours, bit of white. I thought at first I'd ruin that, but now it's dried off a little bit more. I'm thinking I quite like that. Have I got a favourite? Could be a competition question, couldn't it? Have I got a favourite? I think my favourite is probably this one. And I quite like the little bit of extra drama that the white's added in. So, the humble piece of kitchen roll, a paintbrush if you want to, and then we've got all these different looks on a piece of wood. Right, so before I take it off the lathe, I'm just going to put a little bit of black stain in the middle just to tidy it up and give it a more photogenic look. But of course, ordinarily, the inside would be turned out. But it's not a turning day today, it's a colouring day. So a little bit of stain. The easiest way to put this on against that edge is to use a brush. You can do it with the lathe spinning if you want, but it's not really needed. You can just spin it by hand, and that will give us perhaps a tidier middle that will give a clear edge or a cleaner edge for the other colours to be seen against. And in fact, it might just be a case of beauty being in the eye of the beholder, but I think just colouring that in black, you can see what I was talking about earlier about having a clean edge or a defined edge against the colour. It does look much better.
That's great, Stuart. Thanks so much for that. And you're right, the black in the centre really does set it off. So that was a great demo. Really enjoyed watching that, and loads of tips and information on there. It's a display piece, obviously, so you wouldn't normally finish it, I guess. What would you do to finish that off?
Okay, to finish it, to protect the finish, I would let it dry for a few hours. Then I'd use the aerosol acrylic sanding sealer. It's important that you use aerosol finishes, because if you brush on this, you're going to move your colours around and ruin your pattern and design. Then over the top of the sanding sealer, 3 coats of the acrylic gloss lacquer, aerosol again, and then give that a day to cure, and then put a bit of burnishing cream on it to really make it shine.
Yeah, the shine will really make the colours pop. That's really brilliant. And if anyone's got any questions on this, are you happy enough to answer them?
Of course, if you've got any questions, then put them in the comments below, and then I'll get back to you with an answer.
Brilliant. Stuart, thanks again. That's been really good. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed that. See you again soon.
Bye-bye.
I've always wanted to do this. Slate 1, no. I've always wanted to do it, and I messed it up. Slate 3, take 1.
Okay, we go on. Do we go on 1 or after 1?
On 1.
On 1. 3, 2, 1. Then we're up.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that was wrong, wasn't it? I went too early.